everyone. Welcome to this beautiful last day of March 31st, 2025 at the Light Gate. And we're coming to you from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We are on Facebook, we're on Roku, we are on Rumble, and we are on YouTube. We have a really good night for y'all tonight. I just want to quickly thank our sponsor for our radio stations. Carnation, we love you very much. Thank you. We adore the fact that you're backing us up. I am excited. I don't know if you can tell. This is a very meaningful one for me. I'm actually nervous for the first time since we've done the show. I cannot wait. So Preston, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's go.
All right. Our faces are a little bit smaller this time.
I don't get it. I know.
That'll fix when we bring our guest in. I'm not worried about it. All right. Thank you, Dolly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for episode number 101 of The Light Gate. Happy Monday. I'm really excited about our guest tonight, Paul Stonehill. I'll bring him in just a second. I want to say a quick hello to all you folks in chat. We love you so much. Thank you very much for joining us this Monday and each and every Monday. I see a lot of familiar faces in here, so let me just say a quick hello to all you lovely people. Because it's because of you we do the show. It's because of you that Monday is that much brighter. So hi, Teresa Lavigne. Thanks for joining us. We got Tim Houston. We got Kaleidoscope Eyes from wet Knoxville, Tennessee. Yes, some pretty interesting storms recently. We have Cherise Bazilla from Tennessee. Aw, Peak. Happy Lightgate Monday. And welcome, Paul. Very, very nice of you. We have Louise. We can always count on you, Louise, from New Jersey. We love you very much. Thank you for joining us. We've got DGK. Hello, DG. We have Namaste. Hello, Namaste. Thank you as always. We love you very much. You are a delight. Yes. Just a real honor to have you and your support.
So actually, it isn't us without you now. You know that, right? Good.
All right. Astral Tourist. Yay. Thank you for joining us. Jay, Carnation. We got Scuba Maru. We got Carol Kai Chen. Oh, so very nice of you. Yeah. Always learning something from Dolly. Preston has such depth of knowledge. Oh, that's so nice of you.
Thank you.
We have Tim Houston. We have Michael Kennedy. Hey, Michael. Hope you're doing wonderfully.
Send my love to Kylie.
We have Star Orchid.
Oh, thank you, sweetie.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your support. You guys, it means a lot. It really does help us. So thank you. Thank you, Star Orchid 8. We truly appreciate it. Happy Monday. Yeah, our guest tonight is amazing. Bob Thorson.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. Bob won the free book was it last show?
Yeah,
or the one before it.
Email, it's on the way.
Oh, he got it.
Oh, that fast. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I sent it priority, so
okay.
Thanks for covering the postage for that, Bob. But yeah, I'm really glad you got the book. Thanks for joining us. We got Jim. We have Houston. We have Flea Market Gold. And Olivia. We have Crypto Mojito.
Hey.
We have Belcher from Marina, California.
Hello.
Very cool. It sounds like it's right on the ocean. We got Gizmo.
Hi, Gizmo.
We got Becky Duncan.
Hello.
We got Brian Morgan. You know what time it is? It's Lightgate time. Yes, it is. Yeah. We're going. Hello, Kaj. Thank you.
Kaj.
We have John Schaefer.
Hi.
And we have another Brian W.
Cool.
Hello, Preston and Dolly and everyone else. Giddy up. Ryan Davis. What's up? I love your hometown videos. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just dropped a new hometown episode number 9. Name any town, any city. I bet you I can find a UFO case there. That's the challenge. I'm betting 100%. So who else do we have here? Oh, Jem Rose.
Hi.
I'm going to put your little question up. And let's see, we have Arvo. We have Tim Houston.
Hello.
We have João Batista da Silva Silva. We have Neil Robotham all the way from England. Wow.
Hello.
So much love. Oh, thank you, Neil. We have Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Hit the like on your way in. So nice of you.
Thank you.
Who else do we have here? Spencer Hunchins. Jim Rose. It's 1:11 a.m. Oh my goodness.
My goodness. Thank you for staying up. Goodness.
We have Yvonne Duquette from Ontario. Oh, I just love how we reach all over the world in this show. Hot and stormy here in Philly, says Bambi Dudley. Oh, well.
Yeah, we've been there, done that too.
In my opinion, good morning. We got White Dragon. We got Carl Mids from England. We have, in my opinion, with a nice, generous super chat donation. Thank you very much. We truly appreciate it. Much love to you, and hugs and all good things. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
We have Mark Eddy.
Mark?
Always a reminder. Ah, nice. Yes, we advertise this show because we want to make sure everyone has a chance.
I know. I see Mark around, by the way. He goes over to Michelle's shows a lot too. So we're all in the same rooms together. Yep.
We have Adam Wards from Bell, Florida.
Hello. Oh, Bell. Been there.
Carla Mids. We have Gizmo with another wonderful donation. Oh my goodness, Gizmo.
Thank you.
You guys are so awesome. Much love, Gizmo. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We got Chris. We got Lucas Pastina from Brazil. We have Dean Chaplin from Australia.
Cool.
And now we have me running into trouble because I'm taking too long saying hello. I can't help it. One more. Indila Banette from London, UK.
Hello.
All right, I better get started. Let me see. Where is the banner? There we are. Our guest tonight, I'm so excited, so very excited. I've been following his research. In fact, we do have one of his books. Dolly, hold it up. Our guest tonight is Paul Stonehill. He is an international researcher and author whose areas of research and published works include UFOs and USOs, Unidentified Flying Objects, Unidentified Submersible Objects, Soviet Space Exploration, and Eurasian Paranormal Phenomena. He was born in Kiev, USSR, now independent Ukraine, and traveled through various parts of the Soviet Union in his youth. He is fluent in Russian and knows Ukrainian. His articles on UFOs and anomalous phenomena have been published in a number of languages throughout the world, in newspapers and magazines. After the demise of the USSR, his articles were also published in Russia, Ukraine, and Central Asian republics. In October of 1993, this is cool, OMNI Magazine featured a story about Paul's work and the research center he had created back in 1991, known as the Russian Ufology Research Center. He has, of course, lectured in the United States, Brazil, and China, and appeared on a number of TV shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Unexplained Files, The Secret KGB Files, and many others. He has appeared on most of the major UFO podcasts, including, of course, Coast to Coast, Fade to Black, Podcast UFO, and many others. Also spoken at many UFO conventions, such as the big one, the International UFO Congress, UFO Megacon, that's where Dolly and I met Paul, and others, of course. His areas of expertise are Russian history, Soviet covert operations, warfare in the former USSR, cross-cultural training, paranormal phenomena in Eastern Europe, Russia, Central Asia, and China, the People's Republic of China. And of course, he has published a number of books, several co-authored by Philip Mantle in the UK. Some of these books include Mysterious Sky, Soviet UFO Phenomena. I believe that's the one we have. Soviet UFO Files, UFO Case Files of Russia, Paranormal Mysteries of Eurasia, Russia's USO Secrets, and Russia's Roswell incident. We'd love to talk about that. He also has a very popular YouTube channel where he does present a bunch of his research. You can find links to his YouTube channel and website in the show notes, so check it out. Meanwhile, let's bring Paul on. There you are. Hi, Paul.
Well, welcome.
Joining us.
So happy you came. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited. We've been following you for a while. Well, I have. Dolly's been mostly out of the UFO field until fairly recently. Being a contactee, she didn't really need to read the books. But yeah, I know you've been at this for a very, very long time. So I'm really excited and honored that you agreed to come on to our show.
And likewise, I really respect you and thank you for inviting me.
Of course, yeah. Well, as I warned you before the show started, I'm always interested in how people got into this field. Did they believe in UFOs when they were a little child? Have you ever seen a UFO? Basically, what brought you to where you are today?
Let me set you at the scene. In the Soviet Union, UFOs were not openly discussed, but of course there were people interested, and I was too. And I was a boy when I met someone in my city, in my neighborhood, who was many years prior, decades prior. He was the Soviet Arctic pilot. I think in 1936, they encountered a UFO flying over the Soviet Arctic. And at that time, under the Stalin plan, the Arctic was being reinforced and much efforts was being put, intelligently so, into making Arctic more accessible. Anyway, they encountered a UFO and they used something like a Gatling gun against it. Luckily, the UFO did not shoot back at them, did not hit them. But he told me that. And outside of that, we had a very interesting magazine in the Soviet Union, a very bold magazine called Technika Молодежи. Well, it's technology for the young people, let's put it that way. And they published breakthrough materials about areas we could call Forteana or paranormal in the United States, reminiscence of the cosmonauts, various ideas about possible visitations, and so forth. And I got my hands on old issues of this magazine, and I subscribed to the new ones. I was very much interested since almost childhood in this stuff.
Wow.
That's amazing. Have you ever gotten to see a UFO in your lifetime?
That was in the United States, in the city called Northridge. I believe in 1990. It was I wasn't the only one. Somebody else from my family was with me. It was a huge fireball racing across the sky. You could say it was the Skanksworks, creation, but we have no proof. Unusual, wow. Very unusual.
Was that Northridge, California?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I know exactly where. That's where I went to college. So
Cal State.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to, of course, people who had their own observations, trying to limit my outreach to people who are qualified, to put it bluntly, to measure what they see, like the military people, scientists, geologists, and so forth, naval officers, aviators, and I've got quite a lot on this. There was a period of time where it was very difficult for me when I was out of the Soviet Union to be in touch with the Soviet developments, but I did. I met sailors, other ways to get information out. And when Gorbachev, blessed man, to tell you honestly, when he came to power and things started changing, so much information became open, especially towards late 1980s. In 1989, the term UFO became allowed to be used in the Soviet Union. Wow. I mean, you could say it, but they didn't. They call it anomalous aerial phenomenon. That was the official designation. And a flood of information was coming out late 1980s. And I was able to publish my Russian language articles about Western ufology in the Soviet Union, any way possible. Yeah. And then Dr. Haynes of NASA, he's around and he's doing good work. and
Yeah.
I helped him get in touch with Soviet ufologists. We were trying to create bridges between Soviet ufology and American ufology. There was so much promise in the air. We could work together. And then we were, envisioning maybe getting Chinese involved. But things changed. And however, there were always people interested in UFO research in the Soviet Union. And some of them were co-opted by the government to be involved in the official top secret UFO research program. I mentioned it in my books. Some of them did it on their own. Some of them paid very heavy price. But if you look at the example of somebody like late Vladimir Azhaja, who was Navy, and he was a Navy veteran, a submariner, and he paid a heavy price for pursuing UFO research and being outspoken. But then he was given a job, but his naval buddies, and he wrote actual document for the Soviet Navy to use for the UFO research. So he got himself in job because, no matter where you look, and in my opinion, in major countries, the military are always very much interested in UFOs and USOs because they need to know how to defend their borders. They need to know who's sneaking in. Is it the Americans? Is it the Russians? The Chinese? And ideology was not something that was very much welcome in the Soviet Union, but we had to live with it, and it screwed up a lot of Russian lives. When I say Russian, I mean all people who lived in the Soviet Union, and but the military always paid less attention to it than others, in a way, the top guys in the military. And there was definitely a lot of interconnection with the United States. We don't even know the extent, but I can guess from my research, from the years of research. And there was never any animosity at the very top in the military. And as I show in my books, and we'll talk about it, in late 1980s, when the NATO generals and Soviet generals got together, and admirals, and they said, well, that thing in the water, we thought it was yours. And the Americans said, no, we thought it was yours. It's neither's.
Wow.
Do you have any idea what sort of conclusions they were drawing about all that, about them being in the water? Did they have a clue?
Yeah, what they did, the best way to do it, to make it much more secretive, even the groups that they used, military scientists, Navy officers who were scientists, very bright people who had operated in the Soviet Navy across all the oceans, collecting information. At the end, the groups were disbanded, and the research conclusions, the findings, were made even more top secret in 1985. It was shut down. Of course, it went, to a higher level of research. And there were a number of conclusions. They thought, some thought it was extraterrestrials. Most people thought it was natural. Some thought it would have to be some extinct animal that were lurking in the waters of the oceans, hindering Soviet submarines and their secret missions. And not only the Soviets. Some thought we were dealing with the new American tracking systems, but at the end, nobody knew officially what it was.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's difficult to get information here in the United States about UFOs in Russia. You're really the go-to guy when it comes to this. So I'm very excited. There's so much to talk about. I'm not even sure where to start. But one thing that did catch my interest was Chernobyl, with UFOs having so much interest in anything nuclear. Do you have any information on UFO activity over Chernobyl?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was prior to 1986. We had observations in Kiev, and I, in one of my videos, I show a very interesting case from the memorable year of 1982. So many things happened in 1982 in the Soviet Union pertaining to UFOs. But during the Chernobyl itself, when the explosion took place, there was an object, a fiery object, in the sky over the site, and it mitigated the extent of the explosion. And in my books, I list names of people who had, I won't remember it now, but it's in the books, names of the people who were involved, techs who were on site, what they had seen, what they had reported. Apparently, the UFO object helped. It was very interesting. And then years after, 2 years after, 3 years after, UFOs kept coming to Kiev, fly over the Chernobyl site.
Wow.
And apparently lately too, but that's lately. I'm very much interested right after the explosion. Yes. And it was recorded, and Ukrainian ufologists also have it in their books, and very, very unusual. But you know what? Outside of that, with Kiev, where I'm from, I know, because when I was a young boy, preteen and so forth, and a teenager, I used to explore it a lot because we have tunnels in Kiev, and there are areas you can go to, and you dig and you can find weapons for going back 1,000 or more years in the hills.
Interesting. Wow.
I mean, it's incredible. But there was a very interesting story, and it was confirmed at least by a few people. There was a rocket ship-like object that was discovered first under the Tsar's time, and the mayor of the city was smart enough to not do anything else and just to put it back into the ground. Okay, but in the Soviet times, they dug it out, and they apparently, Soviet archaeologists, but under, of course, KGB observations, they dug it out, they cut it in a few pieces, and took it to Moscow, the so-called Kiev rocket, with them. Those who knew, to an extent, some of the archaeologists said that inside they saw writings like in Sanskrit, language of India,
Wow.
and Star Wars, like using our modern description, images inside that craft that they dug it out. It's still, of course, a top secret. They didn't play around. They dug it out. They cut it for some reason. Maybe it was that huge. Put it on trucks and took it to Moscow.
Did they ever give you anybody an idea of how old it was?
Well, it had to be thousands of years based on what the archaeologists say.
12,000 easily, yes.
And we have a lot of that in the former Soviet Union. When I say of that, for example, the findings in the Ural Mountains, the strange nanotechnology-like objects that were largely discovered back in 1991, but nobody is really paying attention to it, and there is no funds to pursue research, but very unusual objects that had been discovered in the Urals. And I remember I helped one TV show to even get in touch with the lady who still has it in her desk. For some of them, and others do too. And judging by the research they did, whatever they were able to do, it was like remnants from an explosion that took place there. I believe they mentioned something about 200,000-300,000 years before, and it's like the area of the explosion was so wide, the circles, and the objects were found away from the epicenter. But that's Ural Mountains. Ural Mountains, I don't know how to find an equivalent of this in other countries, but it's full of paranormal phenomena. Right. Going back to the underground, to the legends of the underground kingdoms of the Urals, and the so-called intelligent little people, Chuj, Sertia, who left the surface of the earth and live down below, legends that go back hundreds of years. And we talk about the people, Sami people, and so forth. Well, going to the north, to the Arctic areas, you find a lot of it. And I'm trying to pursue as much as I can because it's so interesting about this very unusual tribe that had disappeared in the bowels of the earth. But there's more than that. There's the Golden Lady of the Urals. It's a robotic-like creature that has been known to the people of the north. There are legends. And, you find connections with the ancient Sumer when you start following up the history. It's like an idol, but this idol is very much like a robot. It's just
Yeah.
that people in the Middle Ages did not know how to describe it correctly.
Right.
Fascinating.
I think she's using infrasound as, and it's very painful to human beings. And we start connecting it with the Dyatlov Pass tragedy, because the layer of this golden woman supposedly, and one of the layers is right over the next pass, where this group perished. That's the Ural Mountains for you. You go to south, you go south, and you find the ancient city of remnants, Archaim, which was abandoned thousands of years ago, but it's such a strange concentric city
Right.
out there in the steppes of the southern Urals. And next to it, not long ago, they found graves of people who lived before with elongated heads,
Yeah.
skulls. So that's Russia for you. That's Eurasia for you, because
Yeah.
if we start here, we go into Mongolia. Oh my God, Mongolia and China. I always try to bring forth information from China. It's a very close society, but they
Right.
also have so much.
They have so much information. You're exactly right.
Oh, they take it very seriously. We know
Yeah.
that.
Exactly. There are so many. I was taught that we live on this planet in 12,000 year iterations. Okay. We're at the end of a 12,000 year cycle right now. And before that, there were multiple iterations on this planet of civilization. Okay. And not all of them were just like us. Some of them had ETs actually living on this planet at the same time. And it's funny because every 12,000 years, we have this catastrophe thing happening. Okay. But it is the position of the planet that causes the most, it has the most history in it, because it's findable for us because we're all together in certain areas of the planet. There's a 6,000 year water event as well, and we're on both of them at the same time this time. One of the things that's interesting is if Russia is up and China is up, we're up here too, okay, in the US. Africa is not so much. It's too hot. It's by the wayside. It's not going to develop civilization as well. We're doing better in the hard north and the middle latitudes and some of the southern. But the southern latitudes mostly did better iterations more than 6,000 years ago. It's like 8,000 before the big, at the start of this iteration. The amount of layers of information that we have in the ground between Russia, China, and here is phenomenal. Literally phenomenal, especially up in Canada. The Vikings were very busy, they went everywhere, and they did like they do in Russia. They buried all their bloody weaponry and stuff like that. But if you go deep, if you wait for the summertime in Sweden, up in the northern parts, going up into, the higher latitudes toward where the Sami live, you go pretty down deep, you start finding things that are like blow your mind. And the Swedes absolutely will not talk about it. They keep it to themselves mostly. Very few people know that they've got that kind of history up there. They won't talk about it. Closed mouth. Burp, burp, no. Okay. Government's totally in control of it. And I've wondered, I've watched around the world what governments are the most closed mouth and the most controlling about it. And it is China, Russia, the United States, Poland, oh my God, Poland, Sweden, Norway.
Everyone likes to guard their secrets.
The Sami especially. They started shipping the Sami out. They were trying to disband them completely in Sweden. They were trying to bring them south. And it didn't work. They were very strong-minded people, and they stayed where they wanted to stay. The only reason my grandmother came to this country was because her mother died, and they immediately pulled her away from her father and brought her to Gotland and brought her into South Sweden. And she ran for her life when she was 18. She said, I don't want anything to do with you people anymore. And she came to the U.S. It is amazing to me as I look back and I start thinking about all the history of all of this, that it is so important for us to have a communication between all of us, détente. I wish that we would just get over ourselves geopolitically and start telling each other, or a massive.
Well, that's one of the wonderful things about this subject, is it's bringing us all together.
Right, exactly. It's supposed to.
And
it's very much time too. It's like we have to be willing to just say, it's okay. I don't care what your secrets are. Just tell us what secrets you have, and we'll forgive all the rest of the stuff. Let's just.
So do you have evidence of pyramids in Russia?
Kola Peninsula.
Yeah.
That's Kola Peninsula is it's a very strange place. Nazis knew the value of Kola Peninsula and they tried to grab it, but the Soviet Union, the army beat them off and kept it. So Kola Peninsula has so many layers, like Dali says, of mysteries. Back in early 1920s, there were expeditions guided by the KGB of the time, of Barchenko and others, to find the zombie effect of the local population. Very interesting. And they chanced upon ancient civilizations, remnants of in the Kola Peninsula. And I mention it quite a lot. And it's there, including the pyramids, including the sacred Saami Sades rocks and so on, which I don't want to, I don't want too many tourists, I should say, to go there because
you don't want to
but outside of that Kola. And look, it's a stronghold of the Russian Navy, as it used to be of the Soviet Navy, and a very attractive place for UFOs and USOs to come. Just as, and listen carefully, the whole Arctic is including areas outside like Greenland, because if you're wondering why President Trump wants to be in touch, my reasoning is this. I know of the finding of the Vice Admiral Matushkin, very sharp, very dedicated, very professional Soviet Navy top officer who had observed a very unusual USO when they had special missions in the waters of Greenland. There is something down below in Greenland. They know. He knew that, and I'm sure the Americans know too. But outside of that, since we're speaking of the North, I really want people to pay attention to the Arctic, because everybody who has the power is paying attention, including China, that's trying to get very much to the Arctic, and of course Russia, because it basically controls most of it. Canada, and then the other countries, Scandinavian countries, the United States, of course. There's something in Arctic, not only the natural resources. Why do I say that? In my book, Russia's USO Secrets, and in the videos you can see, I have a whole playlist or two on the Arctic. There is a lot. Continuous UFO and USO sightings in very strategic areas, nonstop. And there are strategic areas in the Taimyr Peninsula, remnants of the impact of an asteroid that left incredible amount of diamonds, industrial diamonds. People want to get there. Other areas, UFOs, from my observations, are very much interested in our commodities, including natural resources and water, so forth. And they've been sighted there. You can go back to 1989. There was a huge wave of UFOs. Previous years, 1950s, and so forth. So in my opinion, the powers that be realize that something is going on there and maybe are out to defend. We just don't know. But military power is growing in the Arctic, in the Russian Arctic for sure. Outside of paranormal, I also keep an eye on the developments in the Russian arms industry and new weaponry and so forth. They're developing new Arctic stations, new weapons, trying to get scientists there and icebreakers day in and day out. That's very interesting in itself. But I want to bring always something that I try to bring. I know very much about Yakutia. It's the Republic of Sakha. It's a giant territory. You put France multiplied 3 times. This is Yakutia, and there are diamonds. There's so much. There are the cauldrons. We can talk about them. The ancient cauldrons in the Valley of Death and so forth. That goes back thousands of years. But outside of that, I studied their folklore, and I can never forget the ancient stories of iron fish lurking in the waters of.
Oh, wow.
Incredible. I don't know. I told Monica about that too, but very few people pay attention. It's understandable, but I try to bring the folklore legends of the northern people, indigenous people of Russian Siberia and Siberia, the Far East too. I mean, the things you find, and even in the Far East, to me it's fascinating. From the legends and observations of the so-called flying man to giant serpents of the Far East,
Wow.
and much more to the Valley of Dragons. A lot of it, I know a lot because my father had served for years in the Far East and Siberia in the 1950s. He had seen interesting things outside of paranormal he told me about, but it's a largely unexplored area. There are parts of it where people live outside of the government control, villages, small settlements for many hundreds of years. They started escaping under Tsar Peter the Great to that area, and the Russian explorers and so forth. But you can encounter things you can't even imagine. Tribes like in the deep of Brazil, and I was in Brazil too, but I can't compare it. Siberia is huge, full of secrets. And the Soviets used it too, of course, for their experiments, the Urals. So we still have a lot of them classified. Even, of course, there's no more Soviet Union for so many years, but still some objects are classified. And even the USO research, we still don't know. I would say about 60% of what was being studied at that time.
Wow.
I have a question. I'm curious about this. Were there many crashes in Russia in the last 50 years?
If you believe some people, oh yeah, but I don't like tabloids, and I don't like the BS promoters. I will tell you what I know for certain. The crash in 1986 in Dalnygorsk, in the Russian Far East, we can talk about it, took place because there were people who had observed names, remnants. There was a crash in a very interesting one in 1987 in not far from the Kola Peninsula, Murmansk, around Murmansk area. It was a very unusual case. Still, I don't want to say largely classified, but let's say inaccessible. This was part of the Setka program, the top secret Soviet UFO research program I mentioned in my books. The Monsigorsk case was so unusual because the craft that they had found outside a military base was actually created for the small people, like those that disappeared underground, maybe in the US.
Oh, wow.
And the Soviets studied it. It was put in a hangar, right? And they studied it. Military specialists, experts from that UFO research program, they studied it for a while. They were able to roll it out. They actually got in. They broke a few things, actually, unfortunately, but they got in. And those who touched among them things they should not have touched, their hands were burning with radiation too. What they discovered inside was unusual, but it was definitely made for humanoid-like, beings.
Yes.
And at the end, I give the full description in my videos and my books. It's incredible. But at the end, the craft either exploded or simply disappeared in 1987. And Gorbachev, who was on the itinerary to see another town in the area, he actually changed it. And from what we know, he was on site too, so he might have seen it before it disappeared. And I keep trying to promote this case because we have drawings. That's very important.
Yes.
That's second crash, so to say. And there was one more in 1978. Very interesting. It wasn't a crash, but the Soviets were able to shoot down a UFO. And the person who wanted it done, Glushko, I believe his last name, he was a top Soviet scientist. It was his missiles that brought down the U.S. spy plane U-2 with Gary Powers, I believe, Francis Powers.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to help.
What year was that?
Well, that was before the shoot down of the UFO in 1978.
Yeah.
1978. And I brought in my books and as much information as I could because we're not getting any young, and people who were in the prime of their years during the 1960s, 1970s.
I'd like to pose a question about that case. What would you say if you knew that that wasn't an ET, extraterrestrial craft, but a back engineered US craft that they brought down? What would you say to that?
No, because they used the technology from that craft. They knew the difference. They were not stupid in the Soviet. They knew the enemy, and the enemy knew them. And like I said, at the very top, I don't even think they were enemies. They understood.
Exactly. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
cooperating.
they knew what it was.
Yeah.
They were able. It could have been a robotic craft probe. That's that, in my opinion, because I'm very cynical. I don't think a civilization that would travel to great expanses of space is so easy to shoot down or
Well,
bring
that's my
down.
point. That's my point.
Yeah,
I don't think it was ET. I think it was back engineered. And I have reasons to tell you the truth about that because ET, it's impossible to shoot down a craft that's in phase. They do not fly here in the third dimension. They fly in interdimensional phase. They shift. And anything you shoot at them can't reach them at all. And as a matter of fact, if their field, their electromagnetic fields are in graviton wave, there's nothing that can hurt them or bring them down. The only reason a craft can crash is because our electromagnetic field lines are chaotic because our poles are shifting and have been. 1986 is when it started to get really bad. And that's why I wanted to know when those crashes were of the other ones. Because yes, they started crashing everywhere at that point, even up in the high north. The mid-latitudes, the 30th parallel, above and below it, really crashing because those are the most chaotic fields there are on the planet right now.
let me tell you
They were
something.
able to missile one down. It was not ET. It was ours.
Whatever it was, they were
Yeah.
able to use it to improve
Yeah.
their missiles. I want to tell you something interesting since
Okay.
I'm at the liberty to bring up subjects. We had in the Soviet Union a genius of a man, and some Americans knew him. And,
Okay.
the American from UCLA, his friend, the professor, called him someone outside of the boundaries of space and time. I am
Okay.
talking about Ivan Yefremov.
I know who that is. Yes. Okay.
This was a genius par excellence who knew so much, and we grew up, many of us, on his books. Many of the cosmonauts became, but he was a scientist, an explorer. He was an excellent, what you can call science fiction writer. But the more you read his books, and then you start seeing what's going on, the more you find out he was not a science fiction writer per se. He had very interesting expeditions for the dinosaur bones in Mongolia, but more than that, and I'll talk about it as quickly as I can. What I want to say is this: the KGB was not a foolish organization, and they had a lot in their disposal, and they figured out that this man, much beloved in the Soviet Union and much admired, was an ET agent. He was not human. There was a whole investigation into him, and there is 35 years or so after the end of the Soviet Union, the files are still classified. 40 volumes of files on him. And I one of the reasons I went to Africa many years ago, it was because of him. I wanted to, because he knew things about Africa too, and he gave some pointers, which I tried to use, and in Yucatan and so forth. His knowledge was excellent. He was very much into ancient India. He knew the history of the ancient world like very few people do now. And I keep as long as I live, I will explore his legacy and bring more. But the KGB, what they did is when he died, they raided his apartment and they confiscated a number of things, including, I think they wanted to take the urn with his ashes, but his wife, very brave Taisia Fedorovna, would not let them. And his books, some of his books were banned for a while. They would not publish them. There was a reason. I mean,
they wanted his technology. It's the same thing like Tesla. You could call Tesla an agent for ET because he was so psychic. He heard them talking. He listened to them and he learned from them. There are a lot of people like that on this planet, and I'm positive you're talking about somebody who was also one of those. They're hybrid people on this
in contact
planet.
with them, yeah. If not them
Yeah,
himself.
and they probably understood that he had a lot of contact with them. You know, they were teaching him, he was learning from them. He was probably a super genius, and he probably had hybrid DNA. That's why they wanted the ashes. They were looking for pieces of bone because, you know, when you cremate people, not all the
Wow.
bone is sterilized. That's why
Let
they
me
wanted
tell you
them.
something else.
Okay.
Thank you for that. But I want to tell you something else
Okay.
about him. First of all, he, you know, there was a time they wouldn't let him out of the Soviet Union after his expeditions, but he had very good contacts in China. And this is hard to get this information, but they gave him a present from Chinese purple, what is it called? Observatory at that time, apparently an ancient globe thousands of years before.
Oh, wow.
Listen to me. When he was in Mongolia in 1940s, late 1940s, during, I believe it was the second Mongolian expedition, dinosaur expedition, he took his group away from the itinerary. It was very harsh. You can imagine the conditions and so forth. We won't go into that. You can look it up or see my videos. But he took them away. And then he said, we have somewhere else to go. And a few trucks and his group, he took them to a site where he said, we have to dig here. But they couldn't. So he said, okay, it will be easier if we go from the side of the river. It's right next door. Anyway, it was burial site, and it was a grave, but they had huge monolith over it. From the side, from the side of the river, they were able to get to this burial and found inside. I'm just trying to make it quick. A gigantic skeleton with cut off wrists. It's like if somebody tried to bury him and make sure that he does not come out, or nothing else can get in. And they took the bones and the skull with them, and sure, they found a few other things. And on the way in Mongolia, on the way to their itinerary, to their destination, they found a Soviet archaeological expedition, and they trusted them with the findings. And the expedition took them back to the Soviet Union. And I saw just one or two photographs. Very difficult to get them of the skull of this giant. And we don't know what happened to it afterwards.
How tall was this figure?
Say about 9 feet.
Yeah, either way. They never found his wrists.
They were cut off. And there's more to that. I was always, because
It was Anunnaki. It was Anunnaki. They took his wrist because he had implants. They wanted the implants, and they probably lied about it. They probably took the wrists away. Yeah.
When Soviet cosmonauts were flying over Mongolia one day, they saw the image in the sky of this gigantic human being, and I tried to find out just the human shape. But more than that, it's very interesting. He was in Mongolia. He was discovering other things, and we still don't know the extent of the legacies. We'd like to find out what's in those 40 files, 40 volumes, not files, volumes.
Wow.
You
if
know,
you ever get your hands on it, will you call me? Will you please?
I want to tell you more.
Oh my!
Why did the KGB become interested in him?
See, funny thing about the Anunnaki is they're redheads, all of them, every last one of them, and every human being on this earth, including you, Preston, me, everybody within the sound of my voice, all humanity are related to them. We have giantism in our blood. 6 fingers, 6 toes pop up in our DNA all the time. Okay, it's in my family. It's in a lot of families, people that have this. The Anunnaki, Mongolia has redheads, lots of them, okay? And they were spreading their genes far and wide on this planet. And I'm telling you, the wrists, they're hiding the information about the wrists, or the wrists were taken away because they were terrified of why because in his wrists, he would have had an implant that was very powerful. And it gave him the ability to do things on this planet that nobody liked. Trust me, nobody, you know?
Absolutely. Okay. 2 things about something else. When the KGB became interested in him, because in his books, he predicted sites of, let's say, diamond deposits in the Soviet Union. And, people who read them geologists went and found diamonds in those areas, like Yakutia, somewhere else. There's so much more about him. But one thing I want to say, and I made a video of this because somebody will act one of these days. he had a story and about a discovery, a shipwreck that carried a bottle of very unusual substance from the 18th century. The
Okay.
story is very intricate, and one of the reasons I went to South Africa and Africa per se many years ago, it has to do with a discovery in the ocean not far away from Africa, between India and Africa, of a site where they took samples. They were able to from the 18th century ship, and they brought up water from down below. And this water turned out to be, you can say, healing. You can say that because anybody who was cut or suffered among aboard, like sailors who cut their hands, were wounded, a few drops of this water brought them back to life. And Efremov get coordinates. He gave coordinates of this site in his books, and nobody has acted before. I'm still surprised. Even there were people in the Soviet Union asking, why can't we go? But, the Communist Party, the government, they didn't have money, they didn't believe it. But he gave, in 1972, before he died, there was an interview, and he said, you have to understand that there are ancient layers of water from the time when the earth was young, and this water could have qualities we can't even comprehend.
Yeah. It was in the Atlantic.
Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, Fountain of Youth. It was in the Atlantic, this place that he was talking about?
No, well, let me think. It was between the Indian Ocean and between India and Africa in those areas. And I have the coordinates, maybe the ancient Tetra,
Okay.
Yeah, but it's fantastic. And even his books emanated strange effect on people. It made people feel better.
Yeah.
Even when you read them. And it helped somebody close to me at the time when she needed this. And it was this strange, very, very strange, unusual person in the Soviet history. Of course, we had others. I promised you to tell about this Russian Swede, scientist in Russia, architect of the Swedish descent, very, very knowledgeable person. And he was educated back in the times of the Russian Empire, and then the communists took over, and he was engaged in the Civil War too. But in the 1920s, he was able to travel. Genrich Ludwig is the Russian pronunciation of his name. He was able to travel to Italy, to Vatican, and he studied in the libraries of Vatican, and he was able to see ancient manuscripts describing what we call aliens or ETs of the time, visitors to our planet. And his life was hell. He went to the Gulag concentration camps, but he survived.
No.
He was not healthy, but he survived. He became a professor at the well-known Architectural Institute in Moscow, and he gave lectures, and he told his students of this. And I published materials about this as much as I could. I made a video about this too, because I don't want him to be forgotten. But very few people in the West knew or heard about him. But when you talk about Vatican and the knowledge that is there is somebody who saw it.
Yeah.
He trusted him, and he did see it. And
you don't know this, but my father was an architect. Okay. And he knew he was going to be an architect practically from birth. That's what he wanted to do his whole life. And having a Russian father, family from Russia, this is how I knew who you're talking about, because it came down to me. He explained to me a lot of about him. He studied about him in his endeavor to become an architect. My father never went to college. He's a genius, and he learned everything he knew on his own, and then took all the state boards and passed them all. It is so interesting to me that this man was in the Vatican. And did he ever leave behind any information? Did he ever write a book?
Yeah, I'm curious. Do we know anything about what's in there?
Some people have his notes. Some of the people close to him, his notebooks. But you got to remember, when they arrested him and they confiscated everything he had. Right. That's the tragedy of my motherland, is that so much has perished in the fires of this stupid revolution.
Industrial thing.
And-
It's the same way in this country, unfortunately. We have the military-industrial complex. That's what we call it here. And there are many people who just disappear off the face of the planet with information or studies, or it's gone. Families disappear. It's horrible. People are not completely aware of it. We have like big names like Tesla. He is definitely one you can point to and go, yep, there it is. But there are others.
Conniving Tesla. Tesla, who cheated the Red Army out of a lot of money. He was able to screw them over.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, he did.
I know about that. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he did. He was trying to get.
But Tesla was an unusual, but you talk about Tesla. Well, we had two scientists in the Russian Empire who had invented very unusual, I should say, substances and things, and so dangerous that they had to be assassinated for sure. One of them, and this was well before the communists ever came to power, because they invented things that would make weapons unusable.
Yep.
And I have a
Can't
very
have
long
that.
I call it Russian Teslas, but Tesla, I think, knew about them, and of course they knew about him. But again, this is a murky page of history that we don't know much about. But what we know is enough to make us be amazed.
Yeah.
So do you have any information about, here in the U.S., the whole Gemini and Apollo missions to the moon, followed by UFOs? What about the cosmonauts in Russia? Did they have lots of UFO activity?
A lot. And I brought up as much as possible. Again, you can see in my channel, I keep updating. Like, not long ago, I did again about a cosmonaut and his observations and those that preceded him by decades. One of my favorite is my fellow countryman, let's say from Ukraine, Pavel Popovich. But we lived in the Soviet Union, so he was a Soviet cosmonaut. Great person, very knowledgeable. I knew personally Marina Popovich. He's former.
I met her once actually when she came here to LA.
You met her too in 1991, right?
Was that when she was in Los Angeles?
Because I was there too. Was it do you remember if it was in Studio City?
I think so. Yeah.
That's when she gave me those photographs of. We'll talk about Phobos.
Oh,
she was wonderful.
Yeah.
But let me talk about her former husband. What he was for the Soviet Union, he was like I don't know what to call, a godfather of ufology. He protected people like Ajaja and others against too much government pressure. He promoted ufology. It was him that the KGB gave 124 pages of the UFO materials.
Oh, wow.
And he handed them over later to ufologists in the Soviet Union. Excellent stuff. And I translated as much as possible of it. Interesting. It makes you wonder what they didn't give him. And Pavel Popovich, he himself observed UFOs on the flight to the United States, by the way, over not far from Cuba. He had information that he revealed to the extent possible. And he said, I gave military oath not to say some things I cannot say, even if there is no more Soviet Union.
Right.
He talked about underwater bases.
Yep.
Underwater bases and the ancient destruction of a planet Phaeton and the remnants that are flying about in space not far from us. But he gave exact location to the extent possible of the underwater bases around the world. He promoted ufology. He knew very much, but outside of him, we had cosmonauts who had seen UFOs, had heard stories. Were not afraid to come out and say, well, because sometimes when you talk about things like that, you don't fly anymore. And they put you. Some of the most interesting stories that I have is the so-called whisper in space, when the cosmonauts go out on missions and then there is a voice in their head that says, no, you came here too early. You got to go back. And I present stories on that too. It's very, very interesting. A few cosmonauts had it. It's like somebody prevents them from being there. So you came too early.
They did it to U.S. astronauts as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And but I want to talk about the Soviets and also the observations of cosmonauts not that long ago, which is important. Let's say a few decades ago, of things that happened to the psyche in outer space, and how some of them imagined that they were on other planets, being other beings, themselves in body of other beings, and so much more. And I try to be very detailed in my descriptions of what they said. And I present names, and some of them are alive, some of them are still
Wow.
active. You take Tereshkova, for example, she's
Yeah.
still in the Russian Duma, or you take others who are in various programs, including programs of billionaires that are trying to get signals into outer space.
Mm.
Wow. Well, here is the photo that Marina Popovich talked about.
Yeah.
The Phobos, right?
Yeah.
Phobos was destroyed. Phobos 2 was destroyed next to right next to the moonlet. And I have a lot on that, including the ancient Alexandria library materials about those one satellite, not two. But
there's a
you
monolith.
gotta
too.
Buzz Aldrin can tell us much more, but I don't think he's gonna call in today. So but I gotta tell you, this was a very interesting mission. You have to understand, this was a joint Western and Russian, to a lesser extent, mission. This was your détente, so to say. It was an excellent time. Dr. Haynes and I obtained so many of the Soviet articles of the time right after that. And the things I saw Soviet scientists and military say, that our probe was snatched, or the swarm of little bodies around our probe right before the impact, and so much more. And I put it in my books because those newspapers are gone, but at that time they were published, and they were not afraid to talk about it. Perestroika, glasnost, Gorbachev's policies, and that's when we found out a lot of things. Well, anyway, think about this. Ever since, our governments are trying their best to get back to Mars, and especially to Phobos. There was a failed mission in 2011, Chinese-Russian mission. Somebody, I think, made sure that it doesn't leave the orbit of this planet. I know the Japanese are in a haste to get there.
Yeah, they want the monolith. They want to hit the monolith. It is important to them because they understand what it could possibly be, because they're monoliths in our solar system. They're markers for ET. They carry a signal that ET uses to navigate, and they're trying to figure out how it operates.
That can't be natural. I mean, look at that.
Yeah, it is a monolith, and it is an ET monolith.
And
it is a marker. Yeah.
We knew back in the Soviet times, actually, due to Shklovsky, who was a top scientist, a very good friend of Carl Sagan, if people still remember him. And he proposed the idea that, no, this is an artificial creation, this satellite, and so is Deimos. And then there was a period in his life, he said, no, I take it all back. But okay, we understand there is pressure, but they came out. But more than that, I'm not going to talk about Jonathan Swift and his writings about it, nor will I mention right now, but I have it in my videos, and I urge people to see. In Armenia, there's a manuscript that goes back to the times of the Alexandria Library, and it talks about one of the satellites in the skies of Mars, Deimos, I believe.
Yeah.
So we knew there have been civilizations on face of this earth, and maybe their representatives are still here, that knew much more, of course, than we do, and about things like Phobos and Deimos and Pluto. Wait, we start getting. Yefremov predicted in his books that there are remnants of a bygone civilization.
Absolutely.
On the surface of
Mars. Yeah, Mars used to be populated. It was in the sweet spot around, we're nearly where we were. They're a little bit further out than in where we are now. We're closer in than Mars was, but Mars got kicked out because there was a planetoid that came in and it played pinball in our solar system. And when it hit Mars, it blew the entire outside of the planet completely off. they knew it was coming, and they did evacuate all the people off that planet. They were taken away to protect them. Okay, they knew it was coming, but when it hit Mars, it blew off the entire surface of the planet. The planet is outgassing. It's dead cored. It has no magnetosphere. It's done. Its core is completely dead, and it's outgassing. Every planet that had life has a water channel up underneath, the mantle. And what you see at the poles, the water vapor that congeals and becomes ice is the form of outgassing. The planet is actually smaller than it used to be. Mars was bigger than we actually view it now, massively bigger, but it's shrinking because of the outgassing. It is not terraformable, but Phobos is actually a satellite that's part of that hit. When it all happened, it's a piece of a planetoid that came in and it started going around Mars. And they planted a monolith there. Okay. And it's got a signal on it. They, for years and years and years, they know that ET hears us. Okay. They know that all our transmissions they can pick up, they understand, they know what they are, but they have not figured out yet how to have a direct communication with them, because they don't know how they communicate at all. What they're just now starting to realize it's all psychic transmission, period. And it's starting to really grate on them, and they want those monoliths because the monoliths have technology in them that's psychic. Every back engineered craft has stuff on it that's teaching them how to do that, but they're not 100% good at it yet. They haven't come up with the exact technology yet. They're working on it. That's, ongoing.
NASA translated and published work of one of the top Soviet Martian exploration scientists.
Yeah.
And in his book, he says there are cities under underground, under Martian deserts, remnants of ancient cities. NASA
remnants, no life on Mars now. That's right.
Without any comments, without anything, NASA published this study.
Wow.
And this is very interesting. The Soviet Martian program was very much interesting, but the Venetian program was even more exciting. And they found a few things. But now everybody is looking to get back to Venus, including China. And we don't have enough time to talk about China, but they have an incredible space program and missions that are so bold and outgoing. It's incredible, and keep an eye on them. I am. It's very interesting, and they are going to look for the lurkers, the asteroids that can contain alien reconnaissance outposts. They know this. They're not saying they just don't talk a lot, but they do a lot.
Yeah,
that's very important.
Yeah, I think they're going after Venus because they're looking for compounds we don't have here. Venus is very hot. It's a gaseous planet, okay? And it has different types of stuff that's on the periodic table that we understand is there, but we don't have here. And they're hoping that Venus has some of it. They're looking for it. And if they go to Venus, it's all going to be unmanned, but they have to figure out how to keep the craft from going to hell once it gets there, because it's very volatile. And I don't think we have anything yet that would stand the pressure, the heat, all of that on that planet,
We have a few very interesting. I mean, the more we study, Mercury is very interesting. And I would say
they're looking for it there too. Yeah, our sun produces gold. Any star, any star in the universe has the ability to produce gold, and when they blow off in a micronova, components of gold blow off with it and can be incoming on new solar systems, that are being formed or whatever. Earth has composite gold all over it. But it didn't come here naturally. It came from a star, and they know that, and they're hoping also that Mercury can produce that too because of the temperatures that it sustains. I mean, they have all these ideas about what they're hoping to find and what they can get their hands on, and scientists, they got to do. They have to figure it out, and that's what they're all about.
One thing I want to talk about also, when we talked about Siberia and the Far East. One of my research areas, which has been absconded in a way by others, but at this point, it doesn't matter. 3 decades ago, I came with the investigation. I wasn't the first one to do it, but there was the now late Colonel Steinberg from the Soviet armed forces who moved to the United States. He talked about it, but I had my own information about this and later found out confirmation. 1982, very interesting year, like I told you about an hour ago. Soviet divers, frogmen, encountered huge beings. Remember, you asked me about the size of the skeleton, 9 feet?
Yeah.
It was
Right.
about the size of the beings they encountered at the bottom of Lake Baikal.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this. Yeah.
Okay, so let me tell you. So, and of course, they tried to capture them. This was a very unfortunate incident because Soviet frogmen died. They were thrown out from the depths of the lake. And the order came to the Soviet armed forces in other areas like Lake Issyk-Kul. I don't have time to talk about this magnificent body of water today, and it's all its secrets. But again, people can find it in my videos if they want to. Very unusual, but similar conditions. So the orders came to the divers of the Lake Issyk-Kul, military people. Don't try to capture them. Baikal is a very unusual body of water and ancient and precious and unique in many ways. And something is going on the bottom because there's a continuous research, and I show it in my continuous research. The Soviets are very much interested. There is the FSB present. There are two, the current KGB. And of course, the Chinese are next door, are very much interested. And I think are trying to get their hands on the lake as well. So this is what they cited, gigantic humanoid underwater beings. And I then I found confirmation of others who had seen it. It's who had heard about it and talked to the witnesses years later. And the research continues now. But, Dali, in the area of the North Sea, where your relatives might be living in the Sami area, in the White Sea, in that area, in 1930s, they cited something similar.
Yep.
Similar
Yes,
beings. And
Yep.
other parts, even in the Black Sea. So we are sharing our planet with other humanoid civilizations.
That's right. Have
And
been.
the ocean is very deep.
Yes.
Keep your eyes on the Mariana Trench.
I do, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I do.
That's the
And the
deepest known
Soviets-
part in the ocean. Right.
Soviets and the Americans were hand in hand studying it in the harshest days of the Cold War. They were working together on each other's ships, studying that area. I don't know if it was the Challenger or Explorer. I have the details in my research, but China is very much interested. China has been sending expeditions there also. I think Japan is interested, and the Russians and the Americans never left. There's something going on down there, except for pollution, which is pervasive. It's like Phobos. It's like top nations on this planet are very much interested in finding out, and that's the area. But Guam is next door, and I collected stories about sightings in Guam, where the U.S. military bases are. Unusual. If you ever have a chance, you can find them. I think I put them in my book, but outside of that, there was a journalist, young man, who had put together very interesting, maybe 8 years ago, a very expose of sightings. Something is going on in that area, something very active. Then, my major area of interest in the Far East is the Kuril Islands. And I brought up the issue of Matua, the island that the Japanese held, that the Soviets took away without fight from them, which is very unusual. That United States very much wanted to buy from the Soviet Union, but Stalin said no. But the Soviets abandoned it, abandoned the research, except for probably 8 years ago. They became very much excited, and now this area is completely off limits. It's controlled by the Russian army and Russian army scientists. What there is on that island in the Kuril chain is probably a huge facility that goes downward, down maybe 50 stories or more in that island. The Japanese knew what they had, and I think they had eliminated as much as possible of the evidence before the Soviets took over. They didn't even put a fight. This was very unusual. What's interesting is that Nazi ships came to
Yep.
this island after the end of the war.
Yep.
Let us figure out, after the end of the war, 1945, there is something going on in the area. I have collected a lot of information about UFOs and USOs in the Kuril Islands area and around Japan and Sakhalin and Kamchatka especially. But I'll never forget the island of Rashua, a very small island next to Matua, where somebody observed undersea remnants underwater of ancient buildings.
Yeah. You know what Göbekli Tepe is in Turkey, correct? Göbekli Tepe is above water, and where you're talking about is below water. Two different iterations. The planet flops over every 6,000 years. Okay, it flops down and then it flops back up. We're in the position where it's down. When we flop over the next time, it will come back up. And they've been looking for evidence of that. They've also, at the same time, the evidence that they find about those movements of the Earth during these, cycles, the technology that's down there with it is possibly interesting to them. They're looking for it. If you think they haven't found technology, they have. In a lot of these dig sites, they've shut Göbekli Tepe down now because they don't want anybody to know what they're finding down there at all. They've cordoned it off. It's under guard. They've stopped everybody from touching it, and it's the same thing there. And they connect somehow those two iterations, those two different peoples. They're related somehow, and I find it very interesting. I'm also interested in that because it's important for us to realize that these things do happen to our planet. We do have a 12,000 year cycle. We have a 6,000 year cycle. Our sun micronovas every 6,000 years. During especially after a pole change, and we have both of those going on at the same time right this second, and they're trying to figure out where can you go to be safe.
Dali, you know about the Shigir idol?
Yeah,
it was found in the Ural swamps.
Yeah,
it's 11,500 years
exactly.
old. It's I mean, if somebody ever visits the Ural Mountains, you can see it in the museum. It's an incredible thing. And they say that some of the designs and things similar to Göbekli Tepe.
Right.
And in Turkey, and I'm not going to go, there's so much.
That's too much.
But it's there. Anyway, going back quickly to the Kuril Islands, you see the Americans, what's fascinating to me is they knew back in 1940s the value of that island. But Stalin was no fool. He wouldn't sell it. Even if he didn't know the value, he knew somebody else was interested. And the Kuril, that's a very interesting area. Kamchatka Peninsula, oh my God. Kamchatka has so much. It's one of the most paranormal areas there can be, but it's also one of the most fortified with the Russian Navy and everything. But the more information I get from there, the spatial temporal warps in the area, the interesting the interesting beings that are being cited, the UFOs that have been cited coming out from the from bottom of the lake and going up to the air, up to the sky. I have a painting of it also of somebody who visited. But the baneful effect of the UFO, most of the people perished. Most of the people died very, very bad deaths after they were close proximity to that UFO. And then we get to Chukotka. Since I'm giving you, for the time remaining, I want to tell you more about the territories of Russia. The Chukotka, if you spit from Alaska, you can hit Chukotka.
Yeah, that's right.
But they have, of course, strategic Air Force bases, as expected. But for centuries, for thousands of years, from what we know, at least under the Russian domination, Chukotka has had UFO sightings. But outside of that, the indigenous people have stories. First of all, Chukchi people claim that they come from the Orion and so forth, ancient. But outside of that, there is a very interesting lake, a harsh name, something like El Gidgidgin, like that in their language. That lake has an incredible composition. Some say very close to Bermuda Triangle in some of the chemical compositions and others. It probably ancient crater was where the lake was created, and
Right.
there are stories of the flying shaman and of the extraterrestrial like beings around that lake. And the locals, they, when they talk, they're not very interested in this, in discussing this, but they do talk sometimes. And the incredible things you find, there have been expeditions of scientists who find this lake to be very unusual. I talk about it in my books and in my videos, because I want to bring as much attention to the indigenous knowledge. The
Right.
people who live in the Russian territories, they didn't have an easy life, but that's outside of that. They're getting more organized right now, but more information is coming out. And if we go from Chukotka to the Far East area, I've collected interesting legends, even back decades ago. I put it in my books too, of the strange beings that had been seen in the area, humanoid beings, not only the flying men, the transparent like humanoid like robots in the area, and more than that, which cannot be even explained. But we have people like Vladimir Arseniev, who was Russian explorer par excellence under the Russian Empire in those days, and then he lived under the Soviet Union. He did not have an easy life, and when he died, his wife was arrested as the enemy of the people. His family suffered, but he was a hero of Russia to us. And if any of you have ever a chance to see a Japanese-Russian movie called Dersu Uzala, it was an Oscar. I believe they got the Oscar award in 1975. It's about the exploration of the wild areas of the Russian taiga in the Far East, the boreal forest. I know this due to my father, who was there too. And the strange things you find there. I mean,
My father used to talk about that stuff. Yeah.
fantastic. And I've tried to, we have found a little bit more of Arseniev's documents who we thought had disappeared for years. And the setting, if Hollywood ever comes to its senses and want to make a good adventure movie, you can, because there is so much. But the being sighted, I mean, I'm not going to go into abominable snowman or Bigfoot. That's outside even of what we're talking about, but there is a lot. The cryptozoology is incredible. The gigantic serpents observed in the area, also very interesting. Then we have to go to the Urals, because we have a lot of that too.
Right.
And from there we go north. We go through Siberia. We're going north. We already talked about the Baikal Lake. We go to Yakutia. Maybe I don't pronounce it as it should be, but that's the Russian name, Republic of Sakha now. That's where you have the Valley of the Death and the cauldrons, remnants of ancient spaceships that are embedded in the permafrost and emanate radiation like substance. People died who had spent time there. And the legends go back thousands of years of laughing abysses, something that fell on this, or landed on this planet and stayed, and with centuries passing by, it sunk deeper and deeper into the ground until only the cauldrons, the tops, were left. Well, we know what happened. At least I do, because I studied this as much as possible with the locals and forth. The Soviets, they had flooded the area building a power station. But if anybody wants to get to those cauldrons one day, they're down below. Apparently in 1908, at least this is a hypothesis, that there was the final launch of something like a missile, and it intercepted the Tunguska.
The Tunguska blast.
Yeah. All right.
Listen to that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the only launch. Centuries before, they had a few more. We also have, I collect these stories of the deep, far away removed areas of Russia, local newspapers, and they talk about a nuclear-like explosion in 1925. You got to understand, these areas are so secluded. Even today, it's so hard to get there. People live, and it's very cold. It's more, there's more interest today because of the diamonds in the area, of course. but it's very harsh living. It's almost impossible to survive. In one of my videos, I describe to people how they have to use use local resources, and I won't go into that. And they're different from us. Our physiologically, we're different from the local people. They cannot eat the foods usually that we do, because otherwise they become sick, and we cannot eat or drink what they drink. But they needed it to survive, because there's nothing else. There's no veggies, no fruits.
They need higher concentrations of fat, protein. They can't eat sugar; it would make them sick as a dog. They can eat. Their whole diet is just very, very different. You're exactly right, because physiologically they've got to burn carbs and protein way higher for their bodies to stay warm enough to exist there. Otherwise, they drop dead in a couple of weeks. It's not safe for us to walk up there and go try to hang out.
No.
Yeah.
So we go. Yakutia. There's a lot more than that. Also, gigantic birds were sighted. Gigantic bird. This is incredible. There are areas of where people know that. To us, it's amazing, but not to them. They were sighted, and there are more. So we go across. You imagine the map of Russia. We go now west, north, and again through the Arctic. And I already mentioned a few interesting areas, but it's the Taimyr Peninsula. Keep an eye on. It's only like 20% of it has been studied, but those who had been deep inside, scientists and others, talk about remnants, fragments of ancient buildings and structures of civilizations. We have no. Think of Lovecraft and the Hills of Madness, something like that. His book. I mean, incredible structures. We don't know enough, but what we do, I brought it up. From the Taimyr, we go through western, we get to Kola, but even before that, there are areas in the Arctic, like Dixon Island and others, where UFOs have been sighted for especially last decades, because the Soviets had the abilities to look to see what's flying over their secret military tests. And this was in the KGB files too, which areas of the Arctic they have been sighted about. And I'm sure Americans are very much interested too, as are others. And we go on the Kola Peninsula. That's a land of mysteries, and this is where your people live too. And we go towards the western borders of the Soviet Union, of modern Russia, including Keninsberg, former Keninsberg, Kaliningrad, the city of that's used to be Germany. And of course, the Ukraine where I'm from, there's so much, and I mentioned some, but there is also Belarus. I found not long ago evidence of they have perfectly round lakes, like an explosion would leave. And thousands of years ago, something happened in the area. And then in the thickets of the Belarus forests, there is so much of unusual phenomena, strange beings, hard to explain. Even ancient, like serpents there. And, I didn't talk much about Central Asia, but Central Asia, we could talk for hours. And I'm glad I was able to find a lot of examples of unusual memories of ancient civilizations there and fragments. Lake Issyk-Kul is one of them, but there is more. And something to know about the Soviets during their top secret UFO USO research program, they spent time in Kazakhstan and some other areas of the Central Asia because of the unusual UFOs that have been sighted there. And I have examples of abductions from there, of strange flying beings. Kazakhstan is full of those stories too, but it's not the only one. Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, almost nobody knows about this country, but there is so much. There are forms of life that are based in, they're not based on biology and biological like ours. They're based on silicone, for example, forms of life. And I have stories on that. There's more. The sightings of UFOs in that area are incredible, and the contents of the lakes. You talk about Loch Ness. My God, they have beings like that have reported for centuries, from Mongolia to the Central Asia.
You
But
know, in
it's,
the United States, South Carolina has huge, huge round craters all over it. Okay. And when I was growing up, my contact with ET taught me that the last time the sun micronovaed, it sent impactors in all over the northern parts of the planet, all the way up to the the top, from midline up. And that's where all of this is, all over Russia, all over China, all over the US, places, all around the globe, Myanmar, everywhere. Okay. There's some even in the water that they've seen, because when the sun micronovas, it sends the entire outside that's collected all the dust particles, other pieces of debris and stuff from space, and it heats it up till it's molten, and then it's like big round giant balls of stuff, and it impacts the planet every time it micronovas. And we took the biggest hits in the northern hemisphere the last time. That's why you see that. Now imagine when that happens and our planet flops over and the water comes from all over the planet, congealing everywhere, and you see all these animals from around this planet more than 6,000 years ago get trapped in those impact craters. Okay, they're isolated, they can't get out of them, and they just keep developing as they are breeding. That is amazing, amazing history that they won't tell you the truth about.
let me do this, not to interrupt you, but I
Okay.
want to talk about I want to go to the Caucasus Mountains, because I
Yep.
spent time there too in my youth.
Yep.
And
Wow.
the area historical, it's an enigma. It goes back, it goes back so many thousands of years before, but the things you find there, and
Yep.
and descriptions of UFOs from the early Middle Ages and later are incredible. I already talked about Armenia and what they have, the manuscript they have in their library, but Georgia too. I was in Georgia.
Yeah.
It has so much to offer, but few people know about this, including there was a depiction of UFOs next to the crucifixion scene in one of the monasteries. Very incredible. Country is beautiful. But next to Dagestan, I keep finding interesting information about Dagestan. Even, for example, they have an area among the mountains and steppes that looks like Saudi Arabia, Barhan, and it came from nowhere. This sand dune, 200 kilometers, I think, like that, out of nowhere. And there is a very interesting hypothesis that there is an ancient city buried under it, that somebody wanted to cover it, so there is no access to it. Like you said, maybe 12,000 years ago, maybe like that. That's Caucasus Mountains for you. And of course, again, Ukraine I mentioned, and Belarus, and but Russia itself is, even European Russia has so much, so much. And I try to bring different areas in my videos so people know. Preston, you wanted to know about the 1986 case of in Dalnygorsk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I will be brief, but it's very unusual, because you can say it was a UFO, or you can say it was some say it might have been a NATO satellite, because technology, according to some, is available even in the 1970s to the Soviet Union. However, if it was a NATO satellite, the Soviets would have screamed bloody murder. Something fell in January 1986 in the Height 611 in the very interesting township of Dalnygorsk. There was a Chinese name to it that the Soviets took over, Russians took over before then. It's border issues, but it's a very interesting settlement where there are excavations of natural resources in the area ongoing. Used to be a classified city. 1996, something falls down, goes up, goes back down, burns itself, leaves remnants of very unusual metals that I don't think exist on our planets. Metals and gold, we spoke about it, that seem to disappear and reappear. And Russian institutes got their hands on them. They studied them, very unusual. I have chemical analysis. I have all that in my books.
Wow.
What's interesting is that 1 year later, an armada of UFOs came back to the far east, and two of them flew to the area of 611 and circled over it. Very unusual sighting, 1987, I think it was in November. I think 30 or more ships or craft were recorded by local people down below and the military. Nobody had the explanation. And remember, 1987, the Soviet Union is going through changes. It's not falling apart yet, but changes are felt. And it's not, you got to understand, it wasn't like the Soviet Union of Stalinist times. It was different. Gorbachev was in power. Conflicts were ended. He and Reagan talked about alien invasions and how to counteract them.
Yep.
There you go. But this was one day when this object fell in Dalnegorsk. It was one day after the Challenger explosion.
Yeah.
I don't know what the connection is. It was not an American hardware piece that landed there, and nobody knows. And the Soviet government just didn't pursue it. Now there is a museum in the city, and there's the Koreans, especially the Chinese, were very much interested in what happened there. I think they bought most of the fragments because people were selling them. So you got that. You got the mystery of the Chelyabinsk meteorite. And by the way, not long, I think a few days ago, we had another meteorite fall down, exploding. No, it didn't fall down. It flew over the city and it fell into the Ural Mountains. The Chelyabinsk meteorite of 2013, we don't know if it was not a body, an extraterrestrial body that was sent to Earth, not just came by itself like meteorites would. It's a very suspicious case. Yeah, they found fragments. We still don't know what happened.
Wow. Yeah, that's the one that broke windows all over the place and people filmed it.
Oh, yeah, they had that on film, right? They actually had film. That was incredible.
Gary, you wanted to ask me about that city in Karelia, Petrozavodsk?
Yes.
Because of Petrozavodsk, that strange incident that my lovely debunkers who hate my guts ever since I started speaking, they say, no, it was a test of the satellite. Yes, it was. But next to it, and before it, and during this, and after, there were other bodies in the air. There were other presences. And the Soviets knew about that. I'm not even speaking about what happened to the train next to that town where a UFO pulled it. What happened in that city is that very interesting effect on the people down below, on the architecture of the city and the psyche of the city.
Yeah.
What I found Soviets scared.
What I found so interesting about it is this thing came down, went back up, came down again. It was sighted by everybody that was around it, and I think they also said that it was something like a rocket, that went up and didn't make it or whatever. A rocket wouldn't have done that either, and there is a small photograph that you have of it. And I found that very interesting because it's exactly what a UFO would look like if it was in full power. They have a plasma field around them. It's very unique, and they come up on black and white film, or I don't think it was black. It might have been, but the way I was looking at the picture, I was like, oh yeah, that looks familiar to me.
Do you have the picture, Dolly? Can you show it?
Yeah, sure. I'll pull it up. Hold on.
There's so much going on there. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Absolutely. There is so much.
Yeah, that's a craft. That wouldn't be a missile. That would be a craft that's got plasma all around it. And it means it would be in full power when it did that.
It scared the Soviet government.
I bet
to
it
the
did.
extent that they initiated the official UFO USO research program, academic/military. It wasn't that just Brezhnev said it has to go. No, it's not like that. In the Soviet Union, they had the Military Industrial Commission that decided such matters. They allocated funds for the research, and the first program came in, and it existed for 13 years. Very intense. We only know the tip of the iceberg of what they found, but even that is very interesting. Very, very interesting. And of course, if you nowadays, the whistleblowers that keep popping up every week, none of them know really about this, because I could ask questions, but it's gonna lead nowhere. I try to find out from one of them if he knows what Astrakhan dust is, and of course they don't. But there are people in the United States, I have no doubt, at the very top who know what they need to know, and they share information, in my opinion.
I agree.
With with Russia, and of course China, I suspect they would, because there are critical situations.
Right.
Look at the space around planet Earth. Look at this.
Right.
So many
There's a neural
satellites.
net up there. There's nowhere they would have to be working together to keep that up and running and not, bashing everything out of space. They also have problems because the sun is burping CMEs. We got coronal hole problems, streams. It's putting energy in. It's knocking satellites out. They all notify each other when all this is occurring. SpaceX have had test rockets go up that just explode because of incoming CMEs. They're starting to realize that there's serious stuff going on. And in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, I think the military and industrial complexes of all three major countries are in communication with one another about it. And I think that they are somewhat collaborative as well.
Of course. Look at the space forces. They were created in the Soviet Union back in 1960s. And then, President Trump initiated U.S. response in 2018. China has very active ones. Anyway, while we still have time, were there questions that I had to answer?
Oh, yeah.
Audience?
Preston, go for it.
Yeah, someone was asking about the Dyatlov Pass incident. What are your thoughts on?
I think probably 10 or so videos, continuous investigation. What do I think about this? Again, I already indicated the presence of the Golden Woman layer, that robotic being next to the site. I think people are not paying enough attention to it. Was it a Soviet military test? Something was being done in the area. It's incredible what was being done to the investigators and what they found out. But we're learning more and more. And I almost every 3 months or so, I bring more information based on latest research from Russia. Still, there are documents that need to be looked at, and it wasn't just a natural phenomenon. No way. Considering the Urals, considering the area, and unfortunately, less and less people are alive today from the time. There was a very interesting hypothesis that there was a clash of the American spies and Soviet KGB. No, I don't think so. I think it was.
Wow. Yeah.
No. But again, those that are interested, look at my videos, because it will take up hours to talk about this.
Okay. I'm going to do that, actually. Cool. Okay. Next question, Preston.
All right, I'm going to switch out the layout because I don't want it to cover our faces there.
Okay.
But this is from Woo Writers. Do you know of any super soldier programs actively going on in Ukraine or Russia?
Well, they had super soldier training. Actually, there was a very interesting publication in Russia probably 5 years ago in one of the military magazines. And I do have a video on super soldiers and what they were doing to create them. In China as well, they do it. Ukraine is too limited to even talk about in size or importance or what they have in their hands in terms of capacities and wherewithal. No, Russia definitely has done research, and they even use dolphins in this research. They do. I have a lot on that as well. Trying to create the telepathic communication with the dolphins and so forth. I don't believe that they had created super soldiers. At least they had not used them in latest conflicts. It doesn't mean that they don't have them to use for conflicts you and I don't even have any grasp about. But definitely there was research. There has been research in Russia and China.
Yeah. I have an opinion about this, okay? I would like to point out that this might be smoke and mirrors as to what a super soldier is. I think they are robots. They're robotic. And we have them as well. And they are extremely sophisticated. And they can do many, many incredible things. And they would make a human look stupid in their abilities. See what I'm saying? And they need the psychic components so that they can communicate them without going digital communications. then it can't be heard by just anybody. It's a very select way of communicating with them because it's open back and forth communication both ways. And I'm pretty sure, pretty sure that this is all robotic, literally. That's what a super soldier really is.
That's kind of interesting. All right, here's, I'm going to switch the layout again. Let me see, how do I do this? There we go. Okay, now this is not so much a question, but a request from Michael Kennedy. I think I'm familiar with this case. Tell the story of the people being turned into stone.
BS. You need to understand. They copied BS story from a Ukrainian tabloid from Chernobyl at the time when a lot, people were talking about this and that. All those stories is like KGB chasing Egyptian mummies or soldiers turned into stone. It doesn't mean that there are no effects when people are turned into stone. Right. But that particular story, I am even surprised that American agencies would pay attention to it, but they did.
They like to use it. They literally like to use it to keep people asking stupid questions. Literally, not you, Michael. Just they want it out.
No, I have heard of that case, and there are people who take it seriously. And I looked into it. I'm like, I don't see how you could turn someone into stone.
No, thank you.
It doesn't make logical.
It took me some time to confirm that it's yes. But anyway, anything else?
Well, I think we have an interesting one here from Peak, who's asking. You listed all these very interesting archaeological sites. She's asking if you could just magically have any one of these archaeological sites in the world transparently excavated, which one would you pick? Which one would you choose and why?
There are a few. I would definitely go to Yucatan in Mexico. I did some research through the years, 3 times. There's so much, but then I would hesitate because if it turns up, marauders will steal it and sell it on the black markets. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to guard archaeological findings. One of the examples I'll never forget, where I spent a month of my youth in Ukraine. There is an island, very interesting island in the Black Sea. And I was actually down below in the ancient Greek city. They let me go in. They were friends of my father. It's an incredible feeling. You step into antiquity. Anyway, what happened is in that island, there are some unusual things were found and kept. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was no order, anything like that. And marauders, they're called black archaeologists in Russian, but they're just grave robbers. They murdered the guy who was trying to protect it, head of the archaeological station, and they took stuff and they sold it. And it's not only like that. They have a lot of it in Russia too, because there are markets for all this stuff. So unless you have armed guard, I don't want a lot of stuff to come out. There are sites I'm interested in, but if I talk about it too much.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to give people a chance to take a look at your books. And you want to just give a brief statement about each one? Russia's Roswell incident. This is all about UFO crashes.
Yeah, very detailed 1986 description and other stories of from the Soviet Union.
All right, and then of course, Mysterious Skies. That's the book we have.
Right.
That's really
that's an awesome book. Yeah, it's a page turner. It really is.
Thank you.
Filled with all kinds of incidents. Very, very interesting.
This book is in the U.S. Navy reference library, of which I'm very proud, because I like when military people see information of what's going on in other countries. An early book.
UFO Case Files of Russia. You've got a lot of books.
Yes.
I hope you have some more upcoming, Phil, because you have a lot of information.
This is something that I'm thinking about for sure.
Yeah. I think it's important because you're bringing to this country what's going on overseas, okay? And a lot of people here just think we're in a bubble, and they don't realize that this is global, and that it's very important to understand where it's coming from, in the north, in the east, as well as the west. It's important, and you're a perfect person to be doing this. It's like, buy the books, read them.
People should know more about the United States too, like the tunnels under Los Angeles, or some areas of Florida where amazing things could be found.
Yep. I know I grew up in Florida. I grew up in Miami. in the Everglades.
Yeah,
This one is all about USOs, but more than that, we talk about programs too. But the focus is on USOs, on those strange objects that Soviet Navy had encountered, and the Russian Imperial Navy too, in the waters throughout the oceans of our planet.
Well, and then there's of course this one.
Well, I have books in a number of languages now. I'm hoping someday to see Chinese, Arabic, Korean, Hebrew, Japanese, all those languages.
That's fantastic.
Well, it's been amazing, just an absolutely eye-opening show. So I'm still playing around with this format here, but yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Come back.
I will.
Okay, perfect. We'll have
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Seriously, thank you. I've been excited for a long time. When I met you at Megacon, and we were sitting at the table talking afterwards, I wasn't really talking to anybody about who I really was. I was just coming out first time experiencing. The book that Preston wrote about me wasn't even out yet. And I was just listening to everybody. And it's amazing to me that you're really the first person that I got to sit and talk to. And what you didn't say was almost as important what you did say. I've been interested ever since. So it's very cool. And I'm so happy you came. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you, Namaste, all the people who joined and helped contribute to the show. Star Orchid, thank you so much. Bob Thorson, you guys, this means a lot. It helps us so much, in my opinion. Thank you. Gizmo, you guys are awesome. So thank you, Sonny Burnett. Really, really appreciate all you guys. So thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, thank you again, Paul. I hope people
to all of you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Go out and buy your books right away and check out your YouTube channel. Again, look in the show notes. The links are there. Check it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You want to bring us out, Dolly?
Yep. Thank you, Paul. We're coming to you from the Light Gate, from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana, from the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. I want you all to go have a really good week. Please check Paul's books out. They are interesting. It will teach you a lot. He is very informative and he has a lot of information out there. We hope your week is wonderful. Please stay out of bad weather. If you do have bad weather, take cover. Mwah. Till next week. Namaste.
Bye, guys.
Bye.